good people. You are now listening to another episode of Since We Last Spoke with Danny Foxworth. I am your humble narrator, Danny Foxworth, and this one is a special occasion because not only is this the 100th episode of Since We Last Spoke, this is also the 200th overall episode of all the podcasts that I've done. And on top of that, it is also birthday number 45 for your boy.
All right.
And I figured for such a special, momentous occasion, who better to bring in than the people that gave birth to me? So, you know them, you love them. They're multiple time guests on the podcast. My parents, Myron and Ronnie Foxworth. How are y'all doing today?
We're good. How are you?
Good.
Happy birthday.
Happy
Thank
birthday
you.
to you, son.
Thank you. Right before we recorded, they actually took me out to Waffle House and we had some breakfast, and I had the chicken melt bowl, and that was incredible. So how was y'all's breakfast?
It was good. It was good.
It was nice. That was one of my favorite spots from the time we got married.
Yeah.
And I didn't think you were going to choose that spot when I gave you the places to select from. So I was shocked.
And you know what? It had been a hot minute since I'd been to Waffle House. So I was like, you know what? I got a Waffle House itch I need to scratch. And I remember last time I had y'all on together, and I asked y'all, which one do y'all prefer between IHOP and Waffle House? And you chose IHOP, and Dad chose Waffle House. And then just hearing y'all's reasonings behind y'all's decision, and then Dad saying he prefers the waffles, and Mom, you like the idea of having more options.
Right, choices.
Yes. So I remember we were talking about birthdays while we were at the dinner table, and the thing that really I wanted to say for the show is I remember I was spending the weekend at Granny's house, and I had just turned 13. And she asked me, how does it feel to be 13? I was like, I feel like a man. Boy, why did I answer that way? She was like, sure. Boy, you ain't no man. You need to go sit down somewhere.
I remember that.
And so y'all have some upcoming birthdays. And Mom, you in particular, you're going to be reaching a milestone. You're going to be turning 70 in August. So how does that feel?
Surreal. I don't think I would think that I'm going to be 70 if I didn't have you and Melissa as a visual timeline almost.
Mm-hmm.
I get to see you guys and watch how you have grown and matured. And then I remember when I was your age, I remember when I was 45. And it's just hard for me sometimes in my head to realize I'm about to be 70. Now my body knows it. But my head sometimes is like, no, you are not about to be 70. So it's just different, in a good way though, in a good way.
Okay. And Dad, you're going to be 74 in September. So what is 73 like for you?
73, I think it was a little bit different, but not by much.
Mm-hmm.
Really, I don't think about the years. I just live from one day to the next, and I'm grateful for every day that I wake up, still have my sound mind and a pretty reasonable, healthy body.
Right.
So things that I do, around the house, and that keeps me in shape.
Right on. They say a rolling stone gathers no moss.
That's
so
right.
The fact that you're still active, you and Mom are still active. I'll be heading to work and I'll see you and Mom making y'all's daily walks. I'm like, man, look at them. They're still getting after it, man. That's all right. I love that.
But I will say that I also see, as you've gotten older, your commitment to the work that your dad does is the same now. And I don't know if you've noticed that. Like, you'll come home in the middle of the day at lunch, instead of eating lunch, you weed eating.
Yeah.
Or you're like, you weed eat in the morning, and then when you come at lunch, you jumped on a lawnmower so you can get that done.
Yeah.
And so I see you doing what you do, and I know where you got it from.
Yeah.
And that's a really cool thing to just observe.
And even though you're 45 years old, when I see you doing it, I said, that's my boy.
And it's funny you say that, because sometimes I'll pick up on things that I do, and I'm like, good Lord, I'm doing the same thing my dad's doing. But it's the fact that it's just been so many years watching you and seeing you set an example, and then me processing that and absorbing that and applying that to my life. I'm like, man, you know what? This man was on to something. just like you previously mentioned, coming home for lunch and knocking the grass out, so I won't have to do it whenever I get home
At work, after
after
work.
work. And yeah, there's so many things that I'll do or say, and I'll sit back and laugh at myself. Like, even when I laugh, I'm like, holy cow, even my laugh sounds like my dad's. I mean, down to the wheeze.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, this is bizarre, but it's also incredibly fascinating that I pick up y'all's traits along the way. So,
But I think that when you're parenting, being consistent with what you do, being committed to what you do, not necessarily overtly, teaching your child, but you're teaching them through example, and so you're not going, look at what I do. You got to do it just like that. But if you do what you do consistently, your child is seeing it consistently. So you're not sending out mixed messages. And so you can send out that one message that this is a way. And it's up to the child to follow that or not. But if you're sending mixed messages, there's no way the child can follow because they're all over the place,
mm-hmm.
And so I feel like the way your dad attacks the yard, and you've seen that, even when you probably didn't want to get up and do that. But now as an adult, you have a vision for what you want your yard to look like. So now it all like layers together and it makes sense, and you're like, okay, I want to do this because this is what I want it to look like.
And it made me think about how when I saw you mopping the floor that one time, and I think I talked about it on a previous podcast, and I was like, you know what? Because it was a Saturday, and Saturday mornings we do chores in the house, and I was like, I want to try mopping the floor.
Yep.
And I forgot to wring the mop out, and the kitchen floor looked like an ocean. There was just so much water. And you were like, oh, bless your heart, baby. You did good. And I know in the back of your head, you was probably thinking something else. She was like, I'm going to go grab the fan just to dry the floor a little bit faster. And talking about that, it made me think about weed eating. And the first time I tried weed eating, because I've seen Dad weed eat enough times. I think I know what I'm doing. Gosh, I might have been 11 years old. Man.
It whipped you?
What? Man, I looked like, I was like, this don't look nothing like how my daddy did it. And Dad was like, good job, boy. You try. hand that thing back to me. But of course, the more you do something, the better you get at it. And
Absolutely.
I tried. The thing I have to give myself credit for is it didn't deter me from learning how to master getting the weed eater technique down, being that I messed it up the first time. Because I mean, naturally with anything, you're going to mess it up, or you're not. Well, maybe not mess it up, but you're not. It's not going to be the best that it can be because it's your first time doing it.
Yeah. I remember the first time I looked out of the window, and you were at the wood pile, and you were splitting wood.
Oh man.
I just had to stop and I said, who taught him how to do that? And then I could not move from the window. I didn't want you to see me looking.
Yeah.
But I was looking, I was like, he knows how to do this. Like, he knows how to do this. And I was just so like proud and afraid you were going to chop off your foot, but proud and like, oh my God, he can do what his dad does, like it was, I think I actually wrote a story about that. I'll have to share it with you sometime. That I wrote in my journal after I saw that. I was like, wow, he can swing the axe.
But he watched me for a good bit.
Yeah.
And when he first started, I would look, and then I would give him space to do what he do. And then I would start showing him the easiest way to split one by looking at a certain mark in the wood. You remember that?
Yep.
I said, Danny, if you hit it like this, it'll split open easier. But not telling him how to swing, because he had to develop his own groove for the swing, because his power was different from mine. And you have to allow every person to be themselves while you're teaching them.
I love that. Develop your own swing. Swing, but develop your own swing.
Yes.
I'll show you where to hit the mark, but I can't show you how to swing to hit the mark.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. There's like my favorite Prince song, there's joy in repetition. And similar to that, me getting this podcast started, I kid you not, I remember once I set the idea of setting out to do a podcast, I was like, all right, you got to do it. And I was sitting in my room, just shaking, going to press that record button. I'm like, all right, you said this is what you wanted to do, so go ahead and do it. And I pushed the button, and I kid you not, it took me probably 20 takes before I actually decided, you know what, this is a good enough episode, and then I'll put this out. And me being an introvert, I'm thinking, oh, I felt like I was talking forever. And then whenever I hit the stop button, once it uploaded and I listened to it, and I'm like, I only talked for 11 minutes? I was like, man, this is exhausting. Well, you know what? This is what they're going to get. And so from that first episode, I did my first episode January 13th, 2023. And here we are in June of 2025, and I'm at 200 episodes, and I'm like, wow.
That is amazing. And I'm going to tell you, when you said you were going to do podcasting, I had no idea, because you are a really introvert. I mean, you know, you speak when you have to.
You got that from me.
I had no preconceived notions that it was going to be easy, and I wondered if you even launching this was outside of your
comfort
wheelhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely comfort zone, but out of your wheelhouse. And so, when you launched that first one, what kinds of emotions went with that launching? Because, you know, we can talk, or I can write and I'm reading it and it's me, but once I share it with an audience, then I leave myself almost open, right? To get responses. So what kind of emotions did you feel when you released that first one?
My biggest emotion was relief. The fact that it was something that I had mentally had belabored for so long, and then finally putting rubber to the road, so to speak, and then putting that first episode out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then the positive feedback that I got from it, because and really whenever I set out to do Since We Last Spoke, my line of thinking leading up to the podcast was look and see what everybody else is doing and do something different.
Correct.
And nobody can tell my story better than me.
Correct.
And so I figured, why not share my story? It's good to laugh and talk about current events every now and then, but I really made this podcast just sharing my story, opening the window to my world, and then also bringing people aboard that I think have interesting stories and sharing that with the world as well. And just getting so much positive feedback from that first episode, it felt good. It was very assuring that I was on the right path. And then just having all these different thoughts and ideas for show episodes, and I was like, oh, that would be a great episode. And I would just go to my notes app in my phone and then type that in. And then, especially whenever I said I'm doing an episode of like a serious subject matter, that tends to be when I get the most feedback. For example, when I had you and Dad on talking about what it was like taking for an elderly parent that was suffering from dementia, the amount of people that would inbox me and DM me telling me I'm going through the same exact thing, and thank you for sharing that, because that was really valuable information. And that felt good to hear. It's like, you know what? It's good to have podcasts where you just laugh and play and stuff, but sometimes you got to get serious about certain things. Like, if I'm not mistaken, the second episode I talked about my colonoscopy procedure. And a bunch of people hit me up too, talking about I was really apprehensive with getting that because I didn't know what to expect. And then you telling me how quick and painless the procedure was, it really made me go, let me go ahead and do this thing. And then talking about not being afraid to cry, not holding in those emotions, and how holding in those emotions are bad for you physically and mentally.
Yeah.
Like when I talked about the last time I saw Granny when she was alive, and sharing that with the people, and getting an overwhelming response from that. But at the same time, you don't want to beat people over the head with being serious all the time. Right. So it's good to be lighthearted. So like whenever I brought y'all back on to recap what y'all's experience of going to Buc-ee's for the first time and how overwhelmed y'all were. Ooh. And then having y'all back on, having you on for the Mother's Day episode and you, Dad, for the Father's Day episode. And it was so cool and it was so neat hearing so much new information that I wasn't privy to. Like,
But that's the same way we feel about you. Like every time we would listen to a podcast, I'm like, wait, what? He did what? Okay, we will peel them players 30 years back because you got the butt kicking coming.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that childhood episode story when I think you and Dad went on a cruise and I took your company car to downtown Charleston. I was so scared. My worst fear came to fruition. I don't know what wrong turn I made and ended up on the old Cooper River Bridge, the one with the 2 lanes. You talk about white knuckle. I had never been that scared in my entire life. I'm like, I'm in somebody else's car, and that car is not my mom's car. It's the company car, which I had no business driving. And I'm just like, I'm over the bridge like this. I'm probably doing like 25 miles an hour.
They're like, who's the old man on the bridge?
Pretty much. Like I had just gotten my learner's permit too.
And that boss was a pain in the you know what. Ooh, he was horrible. So he would have put all of us in jail if he found out about that.
Yeah.
But I'll just say this.
Okay.
As you started developing your podcast and your format and you started getting more excited about your content and, and your guests and everything. And it made me go back to the childhood, Danny, that would take apart something, some type of toy to make it do something that it was not created to do or make a sound that it was not created to make. And that was your entertainment. So, you always tried to put a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah.
And then you would have fun with that, putting that square peg. Whereas OCD person is like, you cannot put that peg in that hole because it's not the right shape. And you're like, but I can show you how it's going to work. And it's going to be entertaining too. So you took that same mindset that you had for tearing up stuff in this house, and tearing up your sister's toys and making noises out of the C and say that the C and say should not be saying, all of those things. You took that creative mind into this work.
Yeah.
And that's been amazing to watch.
And you know where I got that curiosity from?
Who?
I got it from Dad.
Oh, Lord.
I'll tell you what it was. And it was one of the things that always made me laugh the most as a child. It was whenever you would play the scale on the guitar, that
yeah.
And it would just tickle me to no end. And I was like, man, if he can get a guitar to do that, I can get these toys to do something if I manipulate it to my satisfaction.
And you did.
And that's where I got it from.
Okay.
And you did.
Well, let me tell you this, though. You being an introvert like me, the difference with what you're doing here, when you're doing your podcast, you don't sound like an introvert. The stuff that I do, my machines work for me, my guitar work for me, so I still don't really have to talk.
Yeah.
But if I find somebody that's down in their feelings, and I can reach way down for all the things I've been through in my life and give them encouragement, you don't just blot out all your experiences, but when you see somebody that's down and you already been through that, it's easy for me to help them get through to the other side.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's a part of me where the introvert comes out like a natural talking person.
Right.
Maybe you could word it different, but anyway, other than that, everything that I do, it's like I'm quiet and my mind is always receiving something from up above, you know what I mean? Because that's my quiet time.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of noise going around me, but it's my quiet time. And that's when I can hear from the master up above.
Yeah. And sometimes podcasting is it's almost like working on my social muscle. Well, not really my social muscle, but like my talking muscle.
Okay.
Because a podcast requires you to talk, but I have to shed that introversion whenever I'm in the spaceship. So people will know what's on my mind. People will know what I'm going through. And then I can convey that to the public, and then they receive that however they receive it. And it's just been a really fun journey. It's been an extremely fun journey. It's like I'll be at work sometimes and I'll think, oh, I would love to have this guest on. And then while I'm at work, I'll reach out to them, see if they want to do it. And if they'll say yes, I'm like, all right, let's knock down a date to record. We knock down a date, and after the date's been confirmed, I'm literally at work already like typing show notes in my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And then, man, the rest of the day, I'm like, man, I cannot wait to sit down and pick this
So
person's
you get excited
brain.
right then?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. That's one of the cool things about what I do, is just being able to pick people's brains, like figure out what makes them tick. It always comes from a place of inquisitiveness. There's a fine line between being inquisitive and being nosy.
Correct.
And inquisitive, I'm all about that, because I like talking to people that don't do the same things that I do.
Correct.
And again, it's like, how did you get to this point? Like, what made you do this? So what led you to pursuing this field? And it's just always, every time I interview somebody, it's just always a treat. And even when somebody reaches out saying, I want to be on the podcast, and I'm like, man, I really don't know anything about them. But then that makes me have to go and do my due diligence and do my research. So then when the time's to come to record, we can have a genuine rapport. And this a very curiosity-based rapport. So it's never boring.
So let me ask you this. Have you ever had someone to say, I want to be on your podcast, and you're like, never mind?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have. I'm not even going to sit here and lie to you.
Okay.
I have.
But having that inquisitive mind, that's how I became a painter.
So let's talk about that, because it's funny you say that, because I literally wanted to get to this portion of the program, but you were working at a chemical plant and you took up painting as a hobby.
Yeah.
And then the plant closed, and then that hobby ended up becoming the second half of your career, so to speak. So yeah, talk about that, because that's something I always wanted to ask you about.
Well, I was always fascinated with painting, so I would hang around with a couple of people that went, took it up as a trade, right? So I would ask questions, and sometimes they would get really, really annoyed with me because I asked questions that they couldn't answer because of the inquisitive mind.
Yeah.
And I would watch them and take it as far as what they knew how to do, but I needed to dig in to find some stuff that they wasn't doing. Granted, I didn't go to trade school for that, but I learned the trade.
Yeah.
And I kept adding to what I knew, and I kept doing research like what you were talking about. And I would ask a question, and sometimes every time somebody would tell me something wrong, I could tell that wasn't right. So I would go to somebody else. Then they would give me the right answer. But here goes this. If you have fear, you will never accomplish anything.
Right.
So because I wasn't scared to try different things, I was able to build from the bottom up. Learning how to prep a car. It's a huge part of getting the job, the end results good. Because if you paint on top of junk or trash, that's what your paint job is going to look like.
Right.
So after I got information from, two people that I hung out with, then I moved on my own, and then started adding and growing with trial and error.
Yeah.
Till I got it down. And then when I got to the body shop, it wasn't much I needed to learn except for how to blend into a door without painting the whole door. And that's what I used to do at my house. I would paint the whole door, and luckily I never had to do anything past that. But learning how to blend into the door when I got to the body shop for my career, that's all I needed to learn, because I had everything else.
So let me just add another layer to this, because when we first got married, your dad worked at the dye plant.
Right.
So he was involved in colors, the creation of colors, the densities of colors, all the components of colors. So it was like the Lord knew what his last profession would be. So he started him off in a profession where he actually worked with creating these colors, right? So by the time he got to the place that he was an automotive painter, he had tons of knowledge of the composition of colors in a way that probably a lot of these people in the automotive industry did not have, because he had it from the fabric textile perspective,
right?
Which was, completely different. But he could talk about, mixing up the batches and, the percentages and all of this stuff. And you go from that, fast forward from that big scale to then going to the paint room where you got the little bit, all of those things and the stirrers are in there, which I always loved looking at those things. But but he had this lens for color for 20 years before he ever went into the paint booth.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that because I forgot about that part. If I mix paint to paint a car and the shade was off, I could tell about how much percent of a certain color I needed to leave out to make that color match. So I got that from 25 years prior to what I was doing, like working at the dye plant. I watched them listen, and when I would cut my color swatch out for them to make the samples compared to the samples that I had to what is the shade supposed to look like. And I would listen to them saying, we need to take about 15% of the violet out. And then I'm watching that, and it came back 25 years later that I can do the same thing with paint. So that's why I wasn't afraid of the paint business, because I knew what she just brought up. I knew the color scheme. I knew how I could see what wasn't right, and I could correct it by going back into the mixing room and leaving a certain amount of whatever out, or adding a certain amount of another color to it to make it work.
So I don't know if you know this, that because he had such a good eye for color, I prefer to go to the Mac counter with him. And so I would go to the Mac counter and he would just be walking along with me, and he could literally walk down the counter and he'd go, that one, that one, that one, and that one. And then he'd go, you can't get that one because you work under lights that have blue in it, and you can see the blue undertone in that, can't you? And he's like doing like this, or he'll say, look at that, that's got a little gold flecks in it right there. Or he'll look at something else and he's like, but this right here is going to look really good in your skin tone because da-da-da-da-da, trust me now. And so when the whoever is serving me comes, I want them to listen to him, not me.
Wait, so when you would go makeup shopping,
yes,
and he would find out what would be the most complimentary color? Wow.
Yes. And for a long time, I felt like if I went to buy makeup without him, I was going in my underwear. I mean, I did not want to go. I didn't trust myself. I just did not want to go because he would walk down the counter, and you know how makeup counters, like, there's tons of stuff. He could just walk and just, that'll look good. That'll look good on you. That'll look good on you. That right there will go with that dress you got. I mean, he was just amazing. I mean, he still is with that. And finally, he was like, you don't need me to go. You know what I do. Just go in there and do like what I do. And I'm like, oh, I can't do it like that, man. Come go with me. He's like, no, I trust you. Just go. You got to try it. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do it without you. Just come and go with me. And I'm standing up in the store by myself thinking, okay, now what would he say? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, then I'd come back home. I'm like, I mean, it took me a long time to actually walk through a store like Sephora and pick out stuff for myself because I trusted his eye with color. He knew what my summer color was. He knew what my winter color was.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when your skin, from being out in the sun. Mm-hmm. So he knew what was complimentary. And he also factored in what the lighting at my workplace was. So he would say, where you work now, he said, what them lights look like. So you can't wear that right there because that's going to look like club stuff. And it's got too much iridescent in it. And it's going to be sparkly. So you need something that's a little bit, that color's good, but you got to get a little bit. You remember that? He would talk me through, and you know how he analyzes everything. So right. It was like he analyzed the whole palette. He could have worked at the Mac store. Women would have loved him. He would be talking them through stuff. All the husbands might have been mad.
But because that was natural for me, it wasn't really like important, like it's standing out to her. I just did it.
Yeah.
Because that's my wife. That's my girl.
Yeah. In some instances, like when I shopped at the Origins counter, the Joe Malone counter, some of the high-end counters, when they send you a card after you purchase, they'll send you a card thanking you, right? Mm-hmm. They put my name and his name on there.
Really?
Oh, yeah. They knew who made the sale.
Because she would take my ideas over theirs, and they were they were supposed to be the one that was the professional, But she said, she said, let my husband do that part.
I know they're probably going, what they doing with this old man in here?
So they would stand back and watch what I was going to say. And then they had something to add to the color that I picked.
Sometimes, but most times it was just whatever he said. I was like, that's what we get. We getting those items right there.
Wow. So, Dad, what was that adjustment like going from the plant to the auto body industry?
It wasn't that bad because you remember now when I was working at Exxon Chemical for those 20 years prior to the 5 years I was working to the dye plant, I was already painting cars in the backyard. Mm-hmm. But the difference was, like, I could take my time at my house, but when I got to the body shop, it was like fast paced.
Mass production.
So that was the difference. That sort of took the fun out of it a little bit because I couldn't take my time and do everything. So what I had to learn how to do is do everything proper and correct at a faster pace.
Gotcha.
That's what the difference was.
And go ahead, Mom.
Well, I want to say from the spouse perspective, his change from a factory work to the automotive industry was a game changer in his stress level. Because when he worked in the factory, he'd get called in the middle of the night if something was going down. And if he had to go in, he had to go in. Yeah. A weekend off might not be a weekend off. And what I found is that when he went there, first of all, it wasn't no days and nights. It was all days. That was great. But because he was doing something on the creative spectrum, he was much more relaxed.
Okay.
Even though it was work, he enjoyed it. He talked about it. When he came home, it wasn't like, oh, here's what happened. It was like, okay, this is what happened, and I had to do it, but the energy was always different. It was always different.
So talking about career changes, you had a career change yourself, Mom, because I remember you were a CAT scan technician and then went from CAT scan technician to getting into education. So talk about that career transition.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I actually started as an X-ray tech, and when I realized that it was going to be hard to be a parent and work at the hospital and work those crazy hours, I actually landed a job at Dr. Myers' office. I just happened to go in there, maybe with your dad, and I had on a uniform. And somebody came and asked me, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm an X-ray tech." Well, he had an X-ray room. Now, granted, it was one that had the old tanks that you had to dip the actual film in. Like you take the film and put it in the developer, put it in the fixer, and hang it up to dry.
Wow.
Yes. So I worked for him for years, but it was great because I could go to work. I could, I breastfed you and Melissa, go put y'all in Mama's bed, go to work, come back home at lunchtime, whatever I needed to do at lunchtime, and go back to work and come home at a decent time and fix dinner because it was right 10 minutes away. So that was real convenient. And then once y'all got older, I felt like I wanted to do more. And they were just opening up the Med First, Humana Med First. Remember that?
Wow, I do remember that.
And I saw it in the paper, and I said, "Well, I'm gonna fill out an application." And I filled out an application, and they called me for an interview. And I'll never forget going to Dorchester Road to the one in Somerville for the interview. And I'm sitting in there, and this lady's interviewing me, and I walked out and got in my car, and I said, "I want her job." I'm like, "That's the job right there I want." They hired me. And I worked there for a long time. And when I got the opportunity to move up to that position that lady had, I got that position at the West Ashley office. And it was a very uncomfortable position for me there because it clearly was a space where people of color weren't appreciated. So there were people threw eggs at the building and stuff because I was there. People would come in the office and they would not want to see me because I'm the man they call office manager out, and I come out and they're like, I want to talk to her.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. People, some of the employees didn't want me, to be there. And I can remember some of them would just, come to work whenever they want and feel like they could talk to me any way they wanted. And one lady specifically would come late, and I stood at the door after about the third time. And I says, you can either come on time or I can get another nurse. And so, she had to get it together. I had a young lady there who was stealing drugs, and the doctor called me and said, we got these drugs missing and the drug count is off and da 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 da. And I'm freaking out because I'm the first Black person that's managing in this medical practice, right? And when I tell your dad what the doctor says, he looks at me and he says, so and so stole the drugs. And I'm like, how do you know? You don't even know her. That's who stole the drugs.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, worked there until it was bought by Doctors Care. And actually, when Doctors Care, Humana was about to pull out, and I heard about Dr. McFarland that owns Doctors Care. He had lots of practices in Columbia and Lexington. And I reached out to him and I said, look, they're about to close these practices. They're all, viable practices. I would love to walk you through what we do. And I went to Columbia and met with him. And I thought surely, because I've, talked with him and he decided to buy all of the practices, I could be, still continue my job as a manager. And he says, we don't have, our managers are nurses. So that was out for me because I was just an x-ray tech. And then that's when I went into CAT scanning. So I went from one to the other. And while I was in CAT scanning, the Lord said, now go back to school. And that's how I became an educator. So I've never regretted any career I've had. I've had fun with every one of them. And I feel like you've got to make, my dad was that person. He made the best out of whatever career he had. I would tell people my daddy could be picking up matches on the side of the road for a job and he would be having a good time. That's just the kind of personality he had. And so I'm grateful that he put that in me, so wherever I sat, I had cake.
I like that. That might be the name of this episode. So what was that? Because really that you should teach a master class in time management because you were working full time. And these aren't short trips; these are long commutes. And then on top of that, you're going to school at night in Charleston Southern full time.
Yep.
So how did you manage that?
And you got to remember this: your sister was a freshman in Tallahassee.
Oh yeah, she was.
So there would be times when I would leave home, go to Allendale, work, drive from Allendale to Tallahassee, and be back for classes at Charleston Southern in the night.
Wow.
There were times that I did that multiple times. And I mean, that Astro van, it just took us down the road.
It did.
So, the time management pieces was like on Sunday, I always made sure the weekend was the time to prep for the entire week, which kind of like what you do now, right?
Yeah.
So, whatever shopping was going to happen. And then Saturday, it was an all day cook fest. You cooking, you got your stuff cooked for the whole week and, get all the clothes ready, whatever needs to happen. Sunday, you go to church, you rest after church because Monday morning it's going to be
back at it.
It's going to be burning it down. And so, yeah, I would do that. And like I said, I always tried to have fun. And, you and I are the same in that. Whenever we go places, we always try to find a cool place that like feeds us. So, even when I went to them little places, there was one little store, I would stop and go, okay, I'm going to stop and get me some squirrel nuts today. Just something fun to do that's different that will make you smile.
Yeah.
And you got to have those kinds of moments in life.
Yeah, man. I remember riding with you to Bamberg Hospital. And every day we would leave, like when in the summertime, I was like, man, can we stop by the Big Chicken and get some chicken gizzards?
Yeah.
And we would do it.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they're still around, but shout out to the Big Chick.
Big Chick is still there.
Really?
Yeah, still there.
Wow.
And the Wee Bakery in Denmark, shout out to them too.
No kidding.
Yes, man. They're still doing it.
That's all right,
yeah.
Man. It's just crazy hearing y'all's stories and hearing like where I get my traits and my characteristics from. It's really been a fascinating listen. And I thank y'all so much for everything. I mean, even whenever I celebrated 1 year of the podcast and y'all brought me a cake and a big balloon, a big inflatable one. I was like, man, that's all right. And I greatly appreciate y'all for being such a big support system.
Absolutely.
Shout out to y'all.
Shout out to you.
And shout out to the listeners. Thank y'all. I appreciate all eyes and all your ears. And as of 2 days ago, we have officially reached a cumulative total of 12,000 downloads.
Wow.
12,000. And I could not have done it without y'all. So I appreciate each and every one of y'all tuning in. And Mom and Dad, I thank y'all for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Actually, before we go, there was something you wanted to share for the churn.
So as you are, into the summer season, I just want to encourage parents to know that this is the perfect time for those life lessons, teaching how to fold laundry, do chores. Remember doing the summer?
Yes.
Yes. But you can also make this a time of using that inquiry. Like my husband and my son just talked about being curious. Go to the beach and do some field work, looking at the different creatures there. Spend some time at your local library, reading about stuff that you're not familiar with. And, hit up a food truck that you're not familiar with and talk to your child about that menu. All of these things are easy ways to grow their knowledge of the world around them. Hope you guys have a great summer.
And couldn't have said it better. So thank you all for listening to it. This has been another episode of Since We Last Spoke with Danny Foxworth. Make sure you like, download, and subscribe. Tell a friend about the podcast. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. And you can find it at Danny Foxworth 843. And we just recently cracked 300 subscribers. So shout out to y'all. Seriously. And it doesn't feel like work. I love doing this every week. 200 episodes in. It's hard to wrap my mind around, but yeah, we're going to keep this podcast thing going for a little while longer because I'm having a lot of fun doing it. So for Dad, Mom, and myself, this has been another episode of Since We Last Spoke with Danny Foxworth. And until next time, y'all be good. Peace.